I think the best way to understand how I am, who I am, and what it is that I am is to understand my parents, right? So I'm really lucky in that I had incredible parents to whom I was born, and even after my father, who I'm named after, Elmer Sr., died when I was 12 years old, I then acquired another parent in the form of a stepfather. And my mother, my father, and my other father have just been an extraordinary example of people who live to serve. I grew dreads for 4 years after school. So I had dreads for half of school and then 4 years later. So by the end of it, I mean, we're talking like down my back. I had big, big hair. I was also like 50 pounds lighter, 60 pounds lighter. I wore a lot of, let me paint this picture for you. Here I go. After school, I moved to New York City. And I will say this without sounding too worried about being vain. I used to be really good looking. So I'm walking down the street in New York City, and I got stopped by, there used to be a show on MTV called House of Style. There was a European version of the show. I got stopped by them, and they're like, we want to talk to you. So I did this interview for the European House of Style because they were interested in my fashion.
The guy from Baltimore?
The guy from Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yep. So I always tell people I've been a couple different people. There's been I went to work on a Tuesday morning in 2001. I worked in Tribeca, and I watched 9/11 happen. I came out of the subway just after the first plane hit, and it was a really beautiful morning. And so I look up, and it was odd because I actually went a different way to work. So I'm looking at the towers, and it was really quite beautiful. And what you see is this giant building with smoke coming out of it. And it wasn't, at that point we weren't afraid. It wasn't a problem. It was like, oh, some knucklehead flew his Cessna into the towers. And one of the images I remember very clearly is there was a ton of paper that had come out of the building. And believe it or not, it was like glitter. It was reflecting on this light. It was quite, it's quite beautiful, except for what it was, right? And so I got to my office, and everybody's turning on the news, and we are trying to figure out what's going on, but there was no panic. And all of this is moving in slow motion because I understand now that the amount of time between was fairly short, and the amount of time between the buildings being hit and the buildings coming down was also pretty short. But got to work, calling everyone around like, hey, take your time, get to work. It's going to be a mess because of what's going on. And then it was revealed that this is not okay. This is not a Cessna. This was on purpose. And then the second plane hit. And then, without going too dark about it, everything in the world changes, right? So the part of the way that changed who I am is I really was aware that everything you understand is reliable is not necessarily reliable. And, even after my father passes, that's not what's supposed to happen when you're a kid. And so I had this second instance of, gravity wasn't quite working. Where I'm like, okay, if I throw something, it's going to fall. Well, I'm going to be an old man and then my father's going to die. That's not what happened. I'm going to live a charmed life in New York City and not have to worry about my mortality. And then all of a sudden, that wasn't the case. I figured out why I exist. And I exist to be a positive coefficient in the lives of others. And I am most proud of my willingness, my decision to lean into that. It's terrifying. It's really scary to think of yourself as being able to change someone else's life because it could go a lot of different ways. So I am most proud that despite the fact that I'm a scaredy cat about a lot of things, that I have taken myself seriously as an agent of change in people's lives.